It starts in 4 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to ask everybody as you're getting in here to go ahead and mute yourself. If you don't know how to do that, I'm able to do it for you. But just so you guys know. And then also, I'll repeat myself a few times, but if you have any questions, feel free to just raise your hand. Or you can go ahead and communicate in the chat. Which is at the bottom of your screen. It will say chat right when you click on the screen, right there. Okay. We're gonna start here in just about a minute. Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Thursday. We're gonna get rocking and rolling here. Just to start off, I have, first off, I'm Hannah Lapiska. I know some of you will know me. I'm one of the landlord liaisons here with Mike Falce. And it's great to meet some of you. I've only been able to talk to you over the phone or through email. So it's great to kind of put some faces to names if you're on video. I have started our chat with including a rent increase form for you, as well as a rent increase calendar. So definitely feel free to save those. Of course, if you need them for future reference, you should have them, but we're happy to always send them to you so you can feel free to email Mike or myself. And I'll put our email addresses in the chat too, but just those are two really handy forms to make sure that you have those on hand. I'm going to go ahead, pass things off to Mike if you want to start. And then we also have our director on here, Kim Longwell, who I'm sure will kind of touch on some things in regards to rent increases. And I think that Ellen's on here too. We have a lot of landlords on here. I'm so excited. 44 so far. So thanks again for being here. And we'll again ask for you guys to raise your hands or put anything in the chat. I'm going to monitor the chat the whole time that we're here. But for now, Mike, if you want to kick things off.
Did everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank everybody for showing up today. And basically, this should be pretty easy. It's just to go over the rent increase and how to ask and when to ask for it. The rent increases need to be submitted to our office 60 days prior to your tenant's recertification date. So basically, and it's common sense, simple math to figure it out. So I'm actually going to leave it there. And if anybody has questions, you can start asking questions for it if you're not understanding how to ask or when to ask for it.
So can I hop in just for a minute, please? If you don't know me, I'm Kim Longwell. I'm the director of the voucher department. So a lot of you have emailed me, questions and whatnot. We, at the end of December, for anyone who doesn't know, and most of you probably do know, we did not have payment standards approved from HUD. And they did not get approved until way at the end of mid to end December. So we allowed people to go ahead, landlords, and request increases without the 60-day notice. We are out of that time period now. So we are requiring landlords to give us the 60-day notice. And that's not the date you mailed it. That's the date we receive it. If you are not sure of the best way to do it, I would always recommend that you email it, scan it, email it. And also for anyone who is requesting a rent increase over the payment standard, or if your tenant is in a larger size unit than what their voucher is, they are going to pay more sometimes. You must have their permission because the tenant is responsible for any payment above their 30%. That does not come from the housing authority. That comes from the tenant directly. So, and I've said this before and I will say it again, please don't go crazy with rent increases for your tenants that have to come out of their pocket. If they love where they live, they will tell you yes, they will sign anything, and the chances of getting that money is probably going to be very frustrating on you, added cost because they're not paying. So that's just kind of my little thing in there. Does anyone need a review of how to do rent, how to know if rent increases are over the payment standard? If so, if you could just please raise your hand, I will ask Ellen to review it with you. Okay, Ellen, can you hop in and let them know?
Thanks, Kim.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So what you have to do to find out if the rent increase you're asking is over the payment standard is you have to go on our website to the map. Does everyone know how to get to the map on the website? If you don't, it's under our www.achsng.com. and then you go to the Housing Choice Voucher Program, and then you drop down and there's the map down there. You type in the address of your unit and the tier will come up, and it'll tell you how much the rent can be for your bedroom size. Keep in mind that we don't use the cents on the tiers. We round down, we don't round up. And then you have to know what utilities you're going to have, or what utilities the tenant pays, and you have to use the utility chart. And you subtract the utilities from that. And that's the amount of rent that we can give you up to the payment standard, that the tenant will pay nothing. It won't come out of their pocket. They'll just pay the 30%. And then we'd have to check and make sure that that's rent reasonable. Does anybody have questions on that? I know you're all probably fairly familiar with it.
I have included the FMR map link in the chat. It's the one that's coded currently, blue, the blue link that's in there. So just as Ellen said, there are a few different ways to get to it from the ACHA website, but this will send you directly to the map. So I just wanted everyone to know it's in the chat right now. And this meeting number 2 is also being recorded. And you can, of course, always feel free to email us if you need to. That's it.
I'm going to add, if anybody can see, we have the QR code that's available. We can send that to you through an email. And it's basically just taking your cell phone, scanning the code. And as Ellen said, it'll take you directly to that map and open up into the field with type in your address. You can do it from your phone, your smartphone. We also have the utility charts available too that we were referring to deduct the rent from when you're figuring out the utilities.
So I saw a question in the chat. In the past, I've been told that the tenant doesn't have enough income for the increase, even though it is within the standards. Can we factor that into our calculation for a request? I don't know. We don't do that. I mean, if it's under the payment standard, it has nothing to do with tenant's income if they've been on the program. It may, however, be with rent reasonableness, because even though that payment standard is that high, you may not get that if it is not rent reasonable for that area. Rent reasonable, it's everything. That's what we still have to use according to HUD, because HUD believes that you can't ask for more money or get more money from federal tax dollars than what the neighborhood is going for. So the only time I think that, and Ellen, please, hop in if you feel you should. The only time we consider income is on an initial request for rent.
That is correct, Kim. The tenant has to have enough income to pay that over. They can only pay up to 40% of their adjusted income, but that's only at initial lease up. It's not factored in at recertification time when you're asking for a rent increase.
I'm sorry, so the tenant can only pay 40% of their income. What do you mean by that calculation?
So if a tenant, let's use an example, if a tenant has a 2-bedroom voucher, but they're in a 3-bedroom unit. And so you want, at initial lease up, you want the 3-bedroom payment standard. The tenant always pays 30% of their adjusted income towards rent and utilities. If it's over the payment standard, the gross rent, the tenant can pay up to 40%. But we only factor that in at lease up time. That's the only time HUD says we have to factor it in. After that, the tenant can pay as much as it is. It's a different regulation, but it is what it is. So that's only at initial lease up. Can a tenant not pay over 40% of their adjusted income.
This is Sharon from First Choice Home. Please leave.
We could not hear you at all, Sharon. Could you please repeat or put in the chat?
Hi, this is Kelly. I have a question. I have a tenant in one of my units where I was paying the water and sewage, but the water bill is just outrageous. So can I change that when it's time for her to renew her year lease?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
At her recertification time, you can request that 60 days prior.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. The change on the rents for the tenants, sometimes when we send the increases, then the housing agency tell us that it's not on the recertification, but then the year from when we started the lease with the tenant is when we are sending the rent increase. We normally send them 90 days before, not even 60, to try to not get caught up with the limit. So is that a different date that it has to be submitted, or is it on the date that the lease starts?
Let me
I
see.
had trouble hearing, sorry.
Yeah,
My apologies. Can you hear me now?
I heard the question. I can answer it.
Okay, thank you.
So your lease has to match the contract. Your lease dates have to match with our contract. If a tenant has been in your unit prior to receiving Section 8, a new lease has to be done. And so that's when you request the increase, when it is contract renewal time. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but the contract is not the same one that we received when the tenant first moves in.
We only have one contract unless you've changed utilities or something.
Okay.
so in the chat too, someone asked, currently the rent is much lower than the payment standard. Is the recertification date the same as the lease renewal date? Also, I currently pay water. How is that something I can add for utility reimbursement? So everything goes with the tenant's annual recertification date. Sometimes you will get rent change notices for interim recertification date. That means the tenant's income has either gone, well, we're not doing increases now, but it has gone down. Their income went down, so we have to recalculate the rent portion they pay, which would make your contract, your HAP agreement, your HAP payment go up. So as far as the recertification date, lease renewal date, when you sign that contract must reflect the lease date. So if you had a lease date with someone else, they moved in before, then they finally get Section 8, that means that you've got to redo that lease. That lease has to reflect the move-in date that we give you. So if the tenant moved in March 1st and your lease was dated January 1st, that lease has to be one year from March 1st. So you're going to have the tenant sign a new lease. And that's basically what that is. I see that the second question was, yeah, the lease date is different. So, and we did say that when you want to change utility costs, you do that at the annual recertification. Just make sure your tenant is aware of it so that they know. And you probably should change the lease accordingly to that. I don't think you have to do a new one, but I would definitely make the tenant at least initial and date the change.
We have, yeah, we have another question from Dominique, who's raised her hand. Go ahead, Dominique.
Thank you. It's a male, but thank you. I appreciate it. I had a question. Last year, I bought a property and I already had Section 8 tenants in it. And the annual, I guess, recertification, it was past due. So I asked the next time I can do a rent increase, and it was explained to me I couldn't be until March of 25. So is there any time there's a 2-year type of thing instead of an every year?
I can grab that one. When we had new owners, in fact, we just talked about this in the housing coordinator meeting yesterday. We had been allowing landlords to ask for increases in rent when they buy a property. But what happens is we can't keep track of that administratively. It has to be on the annual recert date. We have since changed that. If you are buying a new property, I would strongly suggest you do your due diligence. Get what that NOI is. Get what the rent roll is from the previous owner. Because if you don't, we're going to tell you, if you buy it in, say you buy it in February, but the recert date isn't until November, we are still holding you to that recert date.
Okay.
So either decide that you're not going to buy that property or put that into your calculations.
Okay, I guess I was saying that it's usually only the max can be 12 months. I bought it in 23, but when I think it was to you, Miss Kim, I think the misunderstanding was I couldn't change it until the year of 25, but that would make it longer than 12 months. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Can I ask where the unit was?
2721 Crab Hollow Road. It's Gregory Brown.
Okay. Yeah, that doesn't quite seem right.
Okay, I have an email where it showed that, and I thought it was maybe a typo or something, but I didn't know what to do, so I'm glad you guys had this meeting.
Good, so glad that it's helpful. Sierra, go ahead, your hand is raised.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I was muted. All right, so my tenant's lease date was from 1/19 to 1/18, but the certification wasn't signed until 2/25 of 2023, I guess because of the inspection. So I just had my inspection and it failed, and I did what I had to do to have it passed. So is it okay if I do a rent increase now? Because I didn't get like a new recertification or anything yet.
No, you would have to send whenever the annual recertification date is, 60 days prior to that. I think Hannah was posting the rent increase calendar.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay,
the
so I
rent-
wouldn't be able to do. So I wouldn't be able to do one for this year. I would have to wait till next year.
Well, when is the rent increase? I mean, the annual recertification, I'm sorry.
Well, the paper that I have, it was signed on 2/25 of 2023, but
Yeah.
it shows that my lease is from 1/19/23 to 1/18/2024, but I didn't sign any recertification yet, and I just had my inspection like a week ago, and I had the work done. I had to have like the lead people come out, so they came out today, and then I have to do another inspection to pass the inspection after the lead test comes back. So I didn't sign a recertification or anything yet.
Are you a landlord or a tenant?
I'm a landlord.
Okay, so what is the unit number?
312 Mercer Street in Turtle Creek. Tenant is Ashley Walker.
Yeah, that would be for January. Her moving
Okay.
date was 1/19/23.
Okay.
So we would have needed to do that
Mm-hmm.
before that, which would have been November. We would have
November.
needed to have it. It doesn't
Okay,
matter
'cause I
what you
didn't-
sign.
Okay.
The contract you signed?
Yeah, I didn't know if there was like a new recertification I had to sign or for the lease, a new lease. I wasn't sure how that worked to even increase it.
Okay, so you're not sure how to increase the rent? Or how to
Right.
increase?
Yes, I wasn't sure how to increase it. So can I increase it now or do I have to wait till November?
You will need to wait until November.
Okay.
Well, wait. Yeah, to request for it in November, that's correct. Because
Okay.
she's a January research.
Okay. Thank you. That was my only question.
We have another question from Cheryl Richardson. How do you make the change to request the tenant pay the water? Which is, I think, a good question. Do we add that info to the rent increase even though we're not asking for a rent increase? Mike, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the change for request for if the utilities are going to change, that needs to be done at the restart date. As Kim said, 60 days prior. I believe the tenants have to sign off on it. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Yeah, you want to let the coordinator for that tenant know that you want to change the utilities. That's how the change and the rent calculation can be changed at that time. So the increase would affect the utility change. You understand? That'll affect the contract when it's signed too. When the tenant agrees to a change of utilities, that's going to affect the contract, up or down in the total rent. And that'll affect a portion of rent if they're responsible too. I believe so.
Another question, is the best date to use the re-exam date in the portal? Just to clarify, do you mean, is it best to use the recertification date that you have listed in the portal? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so if there's any discrepancy with dates, is the portal the best kind of source for when their recertification is coming up and then just backing out 60 days before that? And I asked that just because we, as landlords, we don't know when our tenants are up for recertification, like they start that process and then we hear about like a inspection or something like that. But by the time we get the inspection letter, we're already within the 60 days. So do we just go into the portal to look at the re-exam date to know how many days out we are from their recertification?
Correct.
That's updated, right? Kim and Ellen? Yeah, that'll reflect the same day.
Well, it updates at midnight if there's any changes, but yeah, that's where you would look is for in the partner portal. If you have questions, shoot us an email. We'll be happy to tell you.
And there is another question. What is this portal you speak of? That will be a whole nother, we'll put that on the list for another topic for another workshop that we have here. We can deep dive into that. There will be a change with the partner portal here coming soon. So we'll address that question separately in another workshop, but you can, of course, Jamie, feel free to email us too about that and we'll explain it to you. In here, from Kim, I've had some issues with submitting the rent increase through the portal. The housing coordinator didn't see or find the increase, and I had to prove that it was done on the portal.
I would say we can post a landlord's email address to send everything to, as far as if you're sending one through the portal, also send it through the landlord's email address where there's multiple people that see that, and mainly Hannah and myself will definitely see it.
I'm going to put that email in the chat right now. Dominique is saying that she also has problems with the portal. I've tried to reset the password multiple times. Again,
yeah.
a totally different topic. We know that the portal is not super user-friendly. Again, there's a change coming and we'll talk about that later. But feel free to shoot us an email. I'm going to include our emails, myself, and Mike's email, and then our landlord's email as well in the chat. From Mike, as a guest, do tenants need to sign the rent change notice, or can we just show proof of notice, such as an email to the tenant? If so, can we copy ACHA on the email to the tenant? If the tenant does not have an email address, is it best to send certified mail? Any suggestions?
Where'd that go?
Yeah, I know it's getting piled down.
Yeah.
Second one from the bottom right now.
They would need to sign it if it takes it over to payment standard.
And we would just go, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we all kind of, the legitimate answer would be, of course, you only have to get it signed if it's above the payment standard. However, to protect yourself, to protect the tenant, and to protect us, we do, even if the rent increase is $5, $7, whatever you need it to be, we would totally suggest that you get that signature. It's just in your best interest to protect everybody. Just as a whole, if that makes sense. So no matter the amount, we would suggest you just go ahead and get the signature. And in regards to having an email, I think you said, sorry, Mike, your question's getting buried. If the tenant does not have an email address, is it best to send certified mail? You can do that. We, again, go ahead, get a signature. You can send a proof of email, but again, we would just go ahead and recommend a signature. Another question. I have emailed and called Nicole repeatedly for non-payment of February rent. I just wanted to know the status. Do I continue with eviction or not? Teresa, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to go ahead, as soon as I'm done answering this question, I'm going to go ahead and post all of our email addresses into the chat. You'll use the landlord's email address to send an email, and then also Nicole's. So I'll go ahead and reply to you. Carla, sorry. What if they don't sign? Can you answer that question? Mike, do you want to go ahead and take that one?
We'll give the increase, but if it's reasonable, it'll get the increase. And then if they do not sign it at the time the increase is done, they'll be notified by the coordinator of the rent increase. And I believe, if I'm wrong, let me know, Kim or Ellen, that the tenant can appeal the increase. Is that correct?
What happens is, if the tenant refuses to sign the rent increase and it's over the payment standard, which means they would pay the extra rent, you have two choices. Tenant has two choices. Tenant either signs it and pays it, or tenant is issued a voucher to move. We cannot give you a rent increase that's over the payment standard without their permission. Same with utilities. You have to have their permission to do it. And if they say no, you know what, go ahead and tell them, then let us know. We'll let them know you have to move. We're going to give you a voucher to move. Now, in the meantime, because I know someone's going to say this, in the meantime, until they find a new unit, we will take you up, your rent increase up to the payment standard. We can't go over it. And sometimes that's enough. Landlords will say, well, I have a good tenant. I just would rather keep them here than turning a unit, And that will be between you and this tenant.
I went ahead and added my email address, Mike's email address, and the landlord's email address. Just to go over that one more time, just in case. I know 2 more people actually just signed on. We do always recommend that when you are sending a rent increase, you send it to that landlord's address. You can, of course, feel free to CC your housing coordinator on there. It's always really smart to do that so they see it. But myself, Mike, Kim, and Ellen are all on that landlord's email address. So the four of us always see an email that goes to that. So you don't have to also include Mike and Hannah on that email. You can just literally send it to that landlord's email and we'll receive it. But also, again, just go ahead and CC your housing coordinator on there so they see it as well. It's never a bad idea to include more people on there. Just want to make that clear.
Just to hop in, if you have problems with the housing coordinator, please don't put it on the chat. Email one of us. We will deal with it. Thank you.
From Kelly, the township requires the sewage and water to be in the same name. I'm willing to pay sewage. Can I have the tenant put both in their name and I pay the sewage bill?
That's something, would that reflect on the contract, I believe, in the amount, wouldn't it? This is that here, township requires sewage.
Yes. What
Yeah.
you can't, you either pay the sewage or the tenant pays the sewage.
Yeah.
There's a utility allowance for
Yep.
that. The tenant is paying it, your your contract rent's gonna go down. So what you can do and what we understand that water and sewage is a lienable item. We are fine with the tenant paying you for it. As long as the tenant is aware of that. Correct, Ellen?
Yes, that is correct.
So I can't have them put in her name and then she just give me the sewage bill and I pay it. Cause I don't want the water in my name because that's what she's running up.
Well, if the water's high, the sewage is gonna be high. You
Yeah,
don't
but
want her
the
to
sewage
pay
is,
both.
I mean, I'm willing to still pay that part for her. It's just, the water is what's really high that I don't want to keep paying.
Yeah, as long as they're broken down, you can do that.
Okay. Yeah, they're two separate bills.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay.
How is that said on the contract then? If it says water and sewage paid by landlord?
It would be water
does that
paid by
reflect the
tenant.
amount?
It would be water paid by tenant, landlord paid sewage. It's who actually pays the bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Anitra, was that you who was just talking? Tenant is responsible for sewer and Stowe Township WVWA bills. The landlord tenant receives a utility check and is behind on paying the sewer bill. Do we notify housing? How do we handle this issue?
Yes, that was me because I have
Okay.
a tenant on the contract. It says they're responsible for water and sewer, but because Stowe bills the owner for sewer for whatever reason, we send the bills to the tenants and only one tenant is always behind, like we're talking almost $300 behind.
You send me the name of the tenant. I will be happy to send them a letter and advise them that if they don't keep up, they can lose their voucher.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and if not, then you're gonna have to take her to court.
Another question that I'm going to direct to Mike. How do you know who your housing coordinator is? And just so we know, this will be the last question that's off topic of rent increases because that is what this this workshop is about. So if anyone has any questions prepared regarding rent increases, please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand. But go ahead, Mike, if you want to answer that question. How do you know who your housing coordinator is?
Well, if somebody's new to the program, the coordinator's not assigned yet till a month or two down the road, maybe less than that. If you don't know who your coordinator is, you can email the landlord's email address and one of us will answer it, let you know who it is and give you that information for that coordinator.
Also, your tenant should know who their coordinator is because they've been communicating with
If
their
they're new,
coordinator.
they're not gonna know though.
Oh, sure. Okay, sure. Okay, any other questions regarding rent increases from anyone? Feel free again to raise your hand or communicate that in the chat. Sadie.
Hi, yes, so what is the tenant's responsibility for the renewals? I know we talked a little bit about if we're asking for more than the standard rent, the tenant has to sign off on it, but do they have any other responsibility for the renewal?
You mean renewing for the restart?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they don't get the renewal and the recertification done on time, then half is held for you guys. We hold the rent. So that's one main thing. Honestly, if maybe keep up on the tenants and ask them when they're due for the restart and make sure they're completing that and get it in on time so it doesn't affect the rent being sent to you guys.
Okay, but there's no other requirement from the tenant. I'm just making sure there. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, Dominique, you're next. Dom, go ahead.
Hey, I seen Ms. Parker write something down for my question earlier. I was wondering if she found anything for that 2721 Crab Hollows Road.
Yes, I will email you privately.
Okay. Okay, do I have to put my email in the chat or something? You already have it?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what was that?
No, we know what it is. We put it in our system.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right.
AL, go ahead.
Hi there, thank you. Sorry I came in late because I had a conflict. So I missed whatever might have been said before, but so pardon the redundancy if this is a repetitive. Two questions. One is, are we obligated to increase the rent to the fair market rates whenever those are changed, or do we have the choice to keep rents at a lower rate especially if you're renting to both Section 8 and non-Section 8 payers? That's question one. And then I'll pause there actually and see what you have to say there.
No, you are not required to go ahead and raise the rent to the payment standard. Whatever you'd like to charge the tenant, you can charge them.
Okay. And then my second question relates to that, and I think it kind of relates to what was asked before. If you have additional fees that you'd like to charge, so whether it's for pets or whether it's for, let's say you want to bill water or something like that, like a standard rate each month, is that permissible or not? Or would that be considered above the rent?
Ellen, you want to grab that one?
That's a.
Can you repeat that question? I apologize.
Sure. No, are you allowed to charge additional fees above the standard rent? So examples would be for pets, maybe there's a utility fee like for water or something like that, or an allowance or something like that.
So I believe you can charge a pet allowance.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Pardon me?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Yes, I believe you can charge a pet allowance if the tenant wants a pet, and like for a garage, but no, you can't charge any other fees.
Okay, so just pets and garage.
That's what I believe. Kim, do you know anything different?
No, that pets are fine. I do want to say one thing about the pets. Please make sure if your tenant is saying this is an assisted animal helping the tenant with physical, emotional. I mean, everyone has heard over the news about airlines and pets who are emotional animals. You cannot, according to fair housing, if that tenant provides you with something that states it is necessary for them to have it, cannot charge extra rent, cannot have a pet deposit. You cannot tell them what type of animal they may have. Hopefully, most people, are, I don't know how you would say it, realize that if they have a horse as an emotional support animal, that's kind of like a little ridiculous. But I think the most we see is dogs, maybe cats. The other thing is you do not have to take multiple animals as your assistant if they are claiming that the animal is an assisted animal. You have to take one, but you can't say that they have a pit bull. Whoever RJ Cobb is, can you, or whomever has it, can you all please mute yourself because no one's, people can't hear. So if,
Well, in your contract, I think that anyway you want it.
thank you. So if they have the emotional assisted animal, they tell you, I need this because I'm depressed, the dog helps me, you have every right to say, okay, fine, but you need to provide evidence. Evidence does not have to be a doctor. Evidence does not have to be a nurse. It doesn't even have to be a medical professional. If they tell you I have a pit bull, you can't say pit bulls unallowed. If it's an emotional assisted animal, if it is not, then you have every right to say, nope, pit bulls aren't allowed. Just make sure that is in writing in a lease addendum, in somewhere in writing that they realize, okay, I'm charging you this security deposit and this pet rent because this is a pet.
That makes sense. And my understanding though is a couple of things related to what you're saying is one, if it's a service animal, that's only a dog. On the other hand, emotional support animals, they can be anything. But I guess what I'm not clear on though is in terms of the documentation, if it can be anything, does it mean that their, parent, for example, could write a letter saying that they believe that this animal is needed for emotional support for this person? Because if it doesn't need to be a medical professional and it could be anything and anyone,
It could be a social worker. Some folks have social workers, caseworkers, but I would not accept it from a parent. I think even though it doesn't have to be medical, you still need to accept it from someone who is qualified.
Okay, and I know that online services as well, and I think see someone noted it in the chat, and I've heard of those where you can pay a small fee and someone will write a letter for you. Is that permissible, or do you think that we could, because it wouldn't be anyone who knows them, they're just writing a letter on their behalf?
I'm going to tell you that is going to be up to you. However, let me tell you the consequences. If you say, no, I'm not accepting that letter, and that tenant takes you to fair housing, you're looking at a fair housing suit, and they're not cheap. That I can tell you, they're not cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, so, and sometimes they do need that assisted animal. I mean, I go home every day after work and I'm stressed out and I pet my beagle. To me, she's an emotional assisted animal. Now I live in my own house, so it's not a big deal. But sometimes it is valid. People think that it's not, but sometimes it is.
Okay. But and then sorry, just to go back to confirm, so the only two cases where you can charge fees would be pets or garage. Is that correct, Kim?
Yes.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Rocco, go ahead. You've had your hand raised for a while.
Okay, thank you. Just a real quick question. So, I have a tenant and I'm charging below payment standards. And if I decide to raise that rent up to maximum payment standard, will that also increase the tenant's portion of the rent? Or will it depend?
No, it shouldn't increase the tenant's portion. Go ahead, Ellen.
It will not, as long as you just raise it up to the payment standard.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And then the works, go ahead, you're next.
This is Sephora. I just had a quick question or wanted clarity about the rent. Like, say in your lease in the beginning, you say there's a no pet policy, and then down the road, the tenant says that they need the emotional support animal. How does that work? And I apologize if it doesn't relate to the rent, but I'm just trying to figure out what do we do in that case, because I don't want to, be stuck, or especially in the lease, you put that there's no pets. And then, like I said, 6 months down the road, now they need that animal.
I would verify it.
Okay.
And if it looks correct, or if you are willing to take it, and that's what I was talking about, then it doesn't matter what's in the lease. So I had this explained to me once from someone from Fair Housing. They said, you know how people use walkers, canes to get around? This is an extension of that.
Okay.
Like, you wouldn't tell someone, oh, you can't have that walker in my apartment because you're going to run into a wall. And
No, I understand that part of it, but I'm just worried that if you in the beginning make it clear that there's like no pets, and then down the road they need that, and then you absolutely don't want any pets in your home, is there any rights protecting the landlord where you kind of made it clear that it's no pet policy in the beginning, but now you understand that person needs that? I just don't, want the landlord to be penalized when that's something that was made clear from the very beginning, that there's no pets allowed.
That's when you would have to enforce your lease. If it's in the lease, no pets.
Okay.
Very cautious on that. That is where I go back to, is the emotional assistance animal a pet? Or is it necessary for them to have a way of living?
Right.
I want to just put an input there. It's just that an emotional support animal is not considered a pet. It's considered part of the family member. That's what the law stands for on the side of the tenant.
Sure. If anyone couldn't hear what Janie said, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but emotional support animals are not considered pets. They're considered necessary. Also, just piggybacking off of that, Kim gave us a great link. Petscreening.com is a great company that screens for validity of ESA letters. It's at the cost of the tenant and not the landlord, which could be helpful. Keeps it valid. Thanks, Kim, for that tip. Any other questions about rent increases? Feel free to put them in the chat, raise your hand. Go ahead, KL.
I just wanted to reconfirm. So the last person asked a question I had also before, if you increase the rent, will that increase their share? Now, it won't do that in the beginning, but will it eventually increase their share at some point in the life of the tenancy, or does their share stay fixed from day one?
So it's an income-based program. So if the tenant's income changes, their portion can change regardless if you increase the rent or not. But if the gross rent is no more than the payment standard, it will never go over 30% of their adjusted income. But if their income increases, their rent portion will increase.
Oh, okay. So it's based on the 30% of their income.
Correct.
Okay, so that will just stay fixed.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Denitra.
Could you just clarify instances where you are above the standards or the rent reasonables when you're able to do that? So I guess in the chat, it said as long as the tenant has signed off on that, then that's allowable. Is that just in general for any amount so that a tenant would be able to have Section 8 and the rent be whatever the landlord sets it at, as long as they agree to it, regardless of that amount?
I'm sorry, I had a lot of trouble hearing that. I think it's my system here.
No problem. I just wanted to clarify. So all of my rents are actually way below the standards. But over the years, I've had different landlords say that they get additional funds, and I know that you are not able to do that through the Section 8 program. But in the chat, it was mentioned that as long as the tenant has agreed to the amount, then that's allowable. So are you able to go above the standards as long as the tenant agrees to it now? Is that what that's saying?
You can, if it's rent reasonable, if it proves to be reasonable when that rent's in the system we use, then that could be allowed, yes. And again, the tenant needs to sign off on the increase.
Okay, so even if it's above.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are all really good questions. Anybody else questions about rent increases? From Kim, is there any way a landlord can get an idea of the amount of rent a tenant is going to be paying? We have issues with signing a lease and finding out later how much of the rent is the responsibility of the tenant. When it comes time that we get the contract and rent notice of how much the tenant is to pay, it's 2 months later and they have to catch up. That proves to be a problem sometimes. Kim, do you want to take that one?
Yes. Sometimes, and it especially happens with portabilities. If the tenant does not come in and give us their updated income, we can't tell you or them what that portion of the rent is. Because as Ellen said, it is an income-based program. So that's going to hold up your part. That's going to hold up the tenant's part. And then they're going to have to back pay. We try to get contracts out as quickly as we can. If we have all the material there, it should go smoothly. But if the tenant is holding something up, we can't do anything about that until the tenant does that work that they need to do to get us the stuff that we need. So as far as that, I mean, honestly, that's about the best I can tell you. I just want to say too, we're getting a lot of landlords saying they're not getting their contracts. Please check your email. That's how they go through. Did that clear it up or did I confuse people further?
That made sense to me. Feel free to Kim, if that answered your question, let us know. The next question from Dom, how do you know if it's above or not? So Dom, at the beginning of the chat, we did put in a link to the FMR map. If you want to feel free, I'll put it, if you want to scroll to the back of the chat, that would be great. If not, I can put the link in again. And all you do there is put in your address to see what the rent amount would be, if that answers your question. I'll put that in the chat again. Anitra, go ahead. You had your hand up.
I did, but you just answered the question, so never mind.
Okay, good. I'll post the link right now. Cheryl, that is very problematic, not knowing if a tenant has a voucher, they will receive assistance. Do you want to go ahead and piggyback off of that, Cheryl? Go ahead, you have the floor if you want to go ahead and talk.
Okay, I'm gonna say something to Kim, and it will be probably part of Cheryl's question. As for the tenant that they owe $1,000 when they move in, here's what I would suggest you do. I think you need to tell the tenant when you sign that lease or before you sign that lease, if you had Section 8 assistance before, continue to pay what that was, especially with portabilities. Because if they're coming in, they have a voucher. They know what they paid before. Then they should be paying you a little bit here and there. If they don't, we don't want to see people evicted. Neither do you. It costs too much. There is, if anyone has a tenant who owes rent, there is Allegheny link where people can get help with back rent. They just got refunded. So I know there's a lot of money out there. If a tenant needs help, it may take a while, yes. But in the meantime, at least they're working to get you that rent. I can post the number. I'll post the number in the chat for Allegheny link.
A great question from Chuck. During the rent increase process, how can we know about its status? No news or good news? I feel like I personally get this question a lot, as I have started to take over receiving the rent increases. I have, if you have a better answer, Kim, Ellen, or Mike, I ask you to check back in with me personally, roughly 2 to 3 weeks after you send in the rent increase. And I'm relatively good about answering emails, I would say. So feel free to just check back in. Chuck, Mike, if you have a better answer, Kim, feel free. You can, again, contact your coordinator would be another answer, I think. Mike, if you have anything else to add.
If you send a rent increase in today and it's due, let's just say for June, the notification to go out about the increase isn't going to be sent to you and the tenant until the recert time and date. I think that's what Chuck's referring to. But no news, good news. Sometimes the bad news comes at the time of the recert to let you know, hey, you asked for such amount of money and that wasn't approved, but this is the rent you were approved of. That it's the only time to that recert date when the coordinator would send out the notification of the rent change.
We would love to be able to tell everyone, but you can't even imagine how many rent increases we get per month.
Yep.
That's why I gave it to Hannah. I'm not nearly as dumb as I look.
I was happy to take them. Anything else on top of that? About that, I think those were pretty good answers. KL, are there limits on the level of security deposit you can require? In theory, if you increase the rent and increase the security deposit accordingly, that will impact how much they pay upfront. If this, KL, are you Kadia? Because your questions are always on point. So thanks for all of your questions. Go ahead, Mike. Do you want to take that one?
If I believe security, you can't ask for more than 3 times the rent of what you're asking for a security deposit. I believe that's the standard. There is a cap on it, I believe. Is that right, Ellen or Kim?
I don't know that there is a cap. At this point. What did you say it was, Mike? 3?
I think if you're asking for $1,000 rent, you can't go above $3,000 for a security deposit.
HUD states that security deposits must be reasonable. You cannot charge a Section 8 tenant higher security deposit than you would someone who does not have a voucher. That does not define reasonable. I don't know if there's state laws. Maybe Mike knows state laws. I don't know that. But that's how HUD defines it, reasonable.
I believe the Pennsylvania state law is 2 months rent is the next month, regardless of voucher or not.
Thanks, Madeline.
That's what I'm to.
I can't hear.
Chuck,
Requires no more than 2 months.
Chuck, we can't hear you. Chuck, we can't hear you.
Of your monthly rent. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We can't hear you.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I believe Pennsylvania law is no more than 2 months rent for the security deposit. And also once you have the security deposit established, if they're a recert tenant or somebody, it's not a new tenant, that's where you establish your security deposit. Once the tenant is in there, subsequently their rents go up, security deposit cannot. That's went through that about a year ago, and that's what I had learned. And that's Pennsylvania state law from what I understand.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about rent increases? We started to get a question to kind of take us back to the very beginning of this phone call. When is it okay to submit? When can you ask for a rent increase? Just so everybody knows, it is 60 days prior to your recertification date. I've included a rent increase calendar that's in the chat, as well as a rent increase form. I'll include those things one more time here in the next few minutes, just so you guys have all of that. But again, it's 60 days prior to your recertification date. I'll include all of that information in the chat. Any other questions about rent increases? Dia asked, does that security deposit 2-month limit include pet deposit and fees?
I think pet deposits, I would say a pet deposit is separate. Because you could keep a pet deposit if that animal chews up baseboards or whatever, like my daughter's puppy did on her rental. You can keep it for that, but what if the rest of the apartment is just perfectly clean? So you want to have them separate.
Quick question about more on the rent increase.
Go ahead, Chuck.
So I noticed I put in submitted there within the 60-day parameter, and got notice the tenant had not put in their recert. I don't know if they had subsequently have done that yet, if they've done their portion for the recertification process. But I understand that has a tendency to slow things down if they haven't done it. If that's the case, is there
Chuck, you're fading out again.
Or just,
Can't hear you at all, Chuck.
Chuck, you're fading out.
I'm for fear of thinking I'm harassing a tenant for I say for fear of harassing the tenant, which I don't want to do, of course, is what else can I do to help encourage or keep the process moving? Okay, you hear me now?
Kind of, but most of what
can you hear me now?
Kind of, but most of what you had stated you had faded out.
I can answer
No, I don't know what else to do. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, Chuck, can I paraphrase, maybe see if this is what you're asking? What else can you do to help the tenant recertify, or help us to get the tenant recertification done so we can pay you your rent and give you that rent increase? Is that what you asked?
I think that was it, Kim. It was breaking up real bad on my end.
So if anyone is out there and they say my tenant won't do the research, my house on hold, whatever, we would love to have your help because that's your money they're holding up. You will get it back if they do the rent research. If not, then we have to terminate their voucher and you're stuck with them because just because we terminate their voucher doesn't mean that they're going to leave your unit. So whatever you can do, we have landlords who will knock on their door and say, give me that paperwork, I'll send it in for you. There's two sides to that, two thoughts that sometimes you want tenants to be self-sufficient. You don't want to have to walk through their door and get it. And I understand that, but on the other side, that's your money. So if you have to harass the tenant, not mainly, but if you nicely say to the tenant and encourage them to get that back, we appreciate it more than you know.
And you'll know that they haven't turned in that paperwork. You'll get a termination letter in the mail. And then once you get that, you can ask the tenant if they've turned in their paperwork.
I think this is a great tip too from
This is Chuck
Kim.
again. Can you hear me now?
Chuck?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I somehow got kicked out of my internet.
No.
I think I got logged in. I heard an answer about encouraging the tenants. It's okay to talk to them. My concern is, not harassing them to do that because I'm sure that rent increases or things like that are unpopular with them to begin with. But I concur with the idea of walking their paperwork. I've done that myself in the past. As you said, it's our money that's being delayed. So, and someone also said that there was a letter that would be sent, and I got that letter saying that we were going to be terminated at the end of the month of March. So just give them a friendly little nudge saying, hey, notice you're being terminated. Is that your intent? And see where that goes, I guess.
Yes, that would be great. You can make sure they got the letter as well and just have them fill out their paperwork. Just tell them to come into the office and fill out the paperwork. Thank you.
Any other questions about rent increases that we have? What I'm going to do now, since we're in a little bit of a lull, I am going to include our Facebook group link in the chat. The Facebook group, Allegheny County Housing Authority Landlords and Property Managers. We try, myself and Mike, along with Kim and Ellen, we try to make sure we keep you updated there. And if anybody would like to subscribe to the email list, a lot of you probably know about the meeting from the emails that I've been really annoyingly sending to you. If you're not already on that list and you'd like to be included, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll include my email again in the chat, along with everyone else's. Any other questions about rent increases before I do that? Dom in the chat, is the price from the chart the amount that we can charge for the rent?
The price on the chart on the map is the starting fair market rent. If your tenant's responsible for utilities, use that utility chart also available in this chat to figure out the rent that way and deduct the utilities from the starting fair market rent.
Hey, good. Just to let everybody know, this meeting is being recorded, so as long as it saves this time, I'll be sending it to you in an email. I'm gonna really quickly include the Facebook group info in the chat, as well as our emails. I did just recently, about 5 minutes ago, include the rent increase form and the rent increase calendar in the chat if you need it. Again, you can feel free to always email us if you need to with any questions that you might have. We will definitely continue to have these workshops every month. We'll you know, we're gonna dance back and forth whether or not we'll do some stuff in person. But for now, we're gonna stick to some Zoom meetings. And one more question from Teresa. This is a really good question. Who all is listed on the landlord email address, so I don't repeat addresses? So to answer this question, everybody included on the landlord's email address is myself, Hannah, Mike, Kim, and Ellen. So the 4 of us, no matter what, we see these the emails that go to that email address. I think all of us would suggest, if you know who your housing coordinator is, to always CC them on the email, just so they have it for their records too. It's never a bad thing to add them on your stuff as well. If you guys want to stick around this, I'm gonna add our Facebook group link, and then if you would like to be included on our email chain, email group, you can feel free to shoot me an email. I'll include that. But if there are no other questions, we'll go ahead and conclude the meeting. We appreciate it.
Hannah,
Yes.
just as a forethought here, and you may have already mentioned it, make sure people are familiar with the landlord portal. A lot of some of this information people are asking are in the portal.
Sure.
I
So
found
yeah,
that very useful.
Sure. So that Chuck, it's a really good point. We'll probably go ahead and touch on the portal. We're going through a big update. So we'll touch on that topic in another workshop, but that could be a whole nother 2-hour-long workshop to talk about. So we'll touch on that another time, but I appreciate that tip for sure. Feel free, again, email us if you have any questions there, but keep a lookout for emails about next and upcoming workshops for sure.
Emails are appreciated. They're not annoying. So keep up the good work, guys. Thanks.
Good. Thanks so much. I'll include everything else in the chat. And then again, this recording will be emailed to everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to see all of you. We appreciate you more than you know.
Yes.
Thank you all so much.